My apologies about getting to this review a little bit later than I normally would. Apparently Sony is down so bad that they just pulled all the show times for Kraven at my local theater. And I've never seen that happen before. It actually made me kind of mad. Not because I was looking forward to watching Kraven, because who would be? But because I had to travel a couple of towns over just to see this movie. And it ended up being a complete waste of time, energy, and gas money, because this movie right here somehow ended up being even worse than people thought it would be. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
Kraven follows his complex relationship with his ruthless father that starts him down a path of vengeance, motivating him to become not only the greatest hunter in the world, but also one of its most feared. Before I get into my thoughts on this abomination of a movie, I think you all should know that something good actually came out of this movie's existence. Apparently, box office projections are so low due to Sony's inability to get anyone interested in this ridiculous universe that as of a couple of days ago, Kraven will be the final film in the Sony Marvel universe. That's right, Kraven appears to be the final nail in the coffin of Sony's Spider-Man villain spin-off universe. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a sign from the cinema gods that the world is finally starting the healing process.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
I want all of you to consider something for a moment, and you let me know how ridiculous this sounds when I say what I'm about to say. Sony, a company that is kind of notorious for fucking up a good thing, thought they were going to start a cinematic universe similar to the MCU, using mostly B and C level villains from Spider-Man's rogue gallery, without incorporating Spider-Man himself at all. I don't know what the Sony was thinking with Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven the Hunter. If you told me that Sony had the intention of making solo films for Green Goblin or Doc Ock, it's still not an ideal situation, but it would have made a little bit more sense. What Sony ended up trying and failing miserably at made no sense at all. They committed the cardinal sin that a lot of modern studios tend to commit. That being, they got in the business of making movies that nobody asked for. And to the surprise of no one, the audience responded accordingly.
No, don't like that.
Speaking on Kraven specifically, if we go to break this movie down in excruciating detail, it is literally everything that was wrong with these movies multiplied by 100. I honestly didn't think that a studio could make a film that was more boring and generic than most of the slop that we tend to get from modern entertainment, but Sony did it in spectacular fashion. This might be the biggest piece of shit of the year, and that's saying something in a year that included movies like Madam Web and Borderlands. As a matter of fact, I would gladly watch Madam Web on repeat before I watch Kraven the Hunter again. And I wish I was joking. When I was watching Madam Web, I kind of got the feeling that the people involved at least knew that they were making a bad movie. On the contrary, it feels like that everyone that was involved with making Kraven is under the impression for some reason that this movie is a lot better than it actually is.
You serious?
This movie will attempt to distract people with cursing and brutal kills, but don't let it fool you. That is merely a crutch. They are using those things to try to trick the audience into thinking that they are having a good time. And here's the thing. I can have a decent time watching a bad movie or a mediocre movie just because I enjoy the theater experience. But while watching Kraven, I was actually miserable. In fact, I was fighting off sleep for most of the runtime. It's one thing to make a movie about a Spider-Man villain without Spider-Man anywhere in sight. It's another thing altogether to take a decent character like Kraven and completely bastardize him to the point that he is unrecognizable. What would you say if I told you that Sony's plan to get around Spider-Man not being in this movie is to basically give Kraven some of his most recognizable characteristics. There is more than one moment in this movie where Kraven the Hunter, the supposed badass assassin, is quipping in the middle of a fight or action sequence.
Why?
The dialogue in this movie is written and delivered in the most atrocious way possible. It's literally cringe on another level. This is the kind of shit that an 8-year-old playing with his action figures would say. It's definitely not dialogue worthy of a major Hollywood production. Listen, I like Aaron Taylor Johnson well enough, but I get the feeling that he was severely miscast here. I'm sorry, but he clearly doesn't have the acting talent to overcome the absolute bullshit that was on the page. In fact, I don't think that there's many actors that could have overcame this level of creative incompetence. Kraven in this movie has one of the most convoluted and ridiculous origin stories ever put on film. You get a sense watching this movie that the screenwriter was desperately trying to stretch the material out to accommodate a feature film runtime. Newsflash, if you have to do that to the detriment of your film, then there's a good chance that the character you're basing your movie on isn't worthy of having his own movie.
That makes sense.
The female lead character in the movie, played by Ariana DeBose, might be one of the worst characters put in a comic book movie that I can remember. Every line of dialogue she speaks is forced and completely devoid of natural emotion that would make her resemble an actual living person. It feels like her character was thrown into this movie last minute because they needed someone to make Kraven's lame-ass origin story possible. And then we have Rhino, and I think it's safe to say at this point that Rhino is one of those characters that just isn't meant to be adapted to live action. He's pretty much a disgruntled henchman turned supervillain in this movie. There's some build-up to his transformation throughout the course of the movie, but the payoff was about as underwhelming as it could possibly get. He's pretty much brought to life with an abysmal design and shoddy CGI. A recipe for disaster.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
Now you would think if they spent an entire movie building up this conflict between Kraven and his father, that it would result in some kind of emotional payoff, given that the issue is meant to be so personal. Unfortunately, the way that this conflict is resolved in the movie isn't remotely satisfying, because the people involved did the bare minimum to establish this relationship, or lack thereof. The action sequences in this film, the big set pieces, are mostly green screen CGI bullshit. Scenes that look so bad that it actually takes you out of the moment every single time. Even the moments in the film where I thought to myself, oh, that's kind of cool, like when they show Kraven scaling the walls, or when they show Kraven taking out countless henchmen with booby traps. All it really did at the end of the day is make me think about movies that did all of this shit better.
Something very familiar about all this.
Think about the first time you saw James McAvoy crawl up the wall in Split. It was both frightening and effective. Think about all the times we've seen characters like Rambo plow through nameless henchmen. Kraven wants to be that. It wants to have that impact, but it doesn't put in the legwork to get us there. Kraven feels like one of those bullshit movies that studios used to put out just so they can keep the rights to a character. Just lazy, uninspired, cliche, poorly written, poorly acted, and poorly shot. This movie is the culmination of everything that is wrong with a modern comic book movie or popcorn flick. Believe it or not, there was a time when even popcorn movies made you feel something. And we are so far removed from that with movies like Kraven that it's ridiculous. Kraven the Hunter is an abomination of cinema and more than deserving of the disgusted Ian Malcolm.
That is one big pile of shit.
Y'all be cool. Right on.